United Nations Climate Change Conference COP30 began in the Amazonian city of Belém do Pará with high-level representatives from almost 200 countries. At the fourth CELAC-EU summit, Venezuela urged countries in the region to form a common front to preserve peace in the Caribbean. And Russia called on the international community to condemn the increase in U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The United Nations Climate Change Conference COP30 is taking place in the Amazonian city of Belém do Pará with high-level representatives from almost 200 countries in attendance. In this scenario, debates focus on how to address the climate crisis before catastrophic levels of global warming become inevitable. The main topics of the conference include the fight against greenhouse gas emissions and the transition to a low-carbon economy. During the 2 weeks of talks, issues related to climate action, forest preservation, the promotion of biofuels, and the guarantee of social justice will be addressed. In his opening speech at COP30, Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva emphasized the importance of multilateralism for sustainable development, saying that the budget for tackling climate change must take precedence over that for purchasing weapons.
The men that go to war, if they were present here at this COP, they would perceive that it's much more cheaper to put $1.3 trillion for us to end with the climate crisis than to put $2 trillion and $700 billion to buy weapons and go to war.
For his part, UN climate chief Simon Steele urged nations at COP30 conference to speed up efforts to reduce emissions and keep alive the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Not sugarcoating it. We have so much more work to do. We must move much faster on both reductions of emissions and strengthening resilience. The science is clear. We can and must bring temperatures back down to 1.5 degrees Celsius after any temporary overshoot. Lamenting is not a strategy. We need solutions.
On Sunday, another shipment of humanitarian aid left Venezuela bound for eastern Cuba to help those affected by Hurricane Melissa. The before-mentioned cargo counts with more than 5,000 tons of food, medicines, household goods, and toys. From the international port of La Guaira, the ship set sail with 102 containers sent by President Nicolas Maduro for the Alpa Bank. It was also announced that a brigade of 22 electrical workers departed to help repair the damage caused by the weather phenomenon. This is the second shipment of humanitarian aid from the Bolivarian Republic to Cuba, following the delivery by air of 26 tons of food and other supplies on October 30th.
Just a few hours ago, we sent more than 5,000 tons of food, toys, medicines, all kinds of goods. A few hours away from the path of Hurricane Melissa, we asked the ambassador when the airport opens the best, at 8 in the morning to 9 in the morning. Venezuela was already there. It must be clear that today we are seeing these 22 professionals next to brother Ambassador Jorge Mayo in the manifestation of love from one people to another.
The Venezuelan Vice Foreign Affairs Minister for Latin America accompanied the 22 professionals in the area of electric energy sent to help the Cuban people.
We are speaking up from the International Airport Simón Bolívar in the name of President Nicolás Maduro, with 22 professionals in the areas of electric energy, transport, and public works. 22 chosen professionals, the best professionals in each of their specialties that will go to Cuba to strengthen the Cuban teams. After what you have gone through, the passage of Hurricane Melissa that caused damage, the Sister Republic of Cuba must understand that these 22 professionals going to the Sister Republic of Cuba will strengthen the teams. There they have the purpose of being able to recover the power line, being able to make diagnosis to continue sending aid that will arrive in the next hours.
Well, we now have our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English. We'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The fourth summit between the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States and the European Union kicked off on Sunday in the Colombian city of Santa Marta. The meeting, which continues through Monday, is being held at the Santa Marta Convention Center, seeking to establish lines of cooperation between the blocs, as well as to review common bi-regional problems that require a roadmap and coordination to achieve positive results. During his first day, Colombian President Gustavo Petro emphasized that Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean must unify their criteria for denouncing any aggression that goes against the principles of multilateralism and global democracy. In the joint final declaration of the CELAC EU Summit, the Colombian head of state emphasized that the solution to global problems such as the climate crisis and poverty requires the joint commitment of all humanity, not of individual countries in isolation.
Adoption of the agenda. I would like to express my deep appreciation to all parties for their hard work over the last 2 days, for their flexibility, support and commitment to reaching agreement on the adoption of the agendas, and for ensuring that we launch our work today to deliver a successful and ambitious outcome of the conference. Together with the chair of the SUBSTA, we held a series of consultations and bilateral meetings.
No country alone can solve the problems of humanity, and the way to do this is not for one country to simply arrogate to itself the right to solve them.
Y la manera no es que un país por sí solo se arrogue el derecho,
but rather that we do it together, and what we have demonstrated, and the world in the midst of barbarities that are advancing, genocides that have undoubtedly insisted that we can talk about democracy and common agreements.
vamos a hablar de democracia y de acuerdos comunes.
In this context, during his speech at the fourth CELAC EU Summit, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil read a letter sent by President Nicolás Maduro, urging countries in the region to form a common front to preserve peace in the Caribbean.
Today, in the face of the threat of war in the Caribbean, and the executions that have been denounced by the United Nations, we are obliged to preserve peace in the region by joining forces as countries and demanding with one voice the immediate cessation of military attacks and threats against our peoples. Justice, peace, and respect for the United Nations Charter must be restored. The international community must demand accountability for the attacks and respect for the human rights of all people without exception.
The United Nations categorically states that the attacks by the United States in the Caribbean and the Pacific constitute a violation of international human rights law. During the regular press briefing of the UN Secretary General, his spokesperson Farhan Haq reiterated the opinion of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. In this context, he stated that the airstrikes in these operations violate international law, especially considering the aggravating factor that none of the people executed posed a threat to others. These attacks, openly supported by Venezuela's extremist opposition, have claimed the lives of nearly 70 people, none of whom had the opportunity to prove their innocence.
Well, on this, the Secretary General supports the views of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, who has made it clear that the airstrikes are in violation of international human rights law. According to the High Commissioner for Human Rights, based on the information that's been available so far, none of the individuals on the targeted boats appear to pose an imminent threat to the lives of others or otherwise justify the use of lethal armed force against them under international law. And of course, we want to make sure that established law enforcement methods are used to deal with questions of illegal trafficking on the high seas. Stefano.
Russia urged the international community to condemn the increase in U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean. The State Duma presented a draft appeal to parliaments of the UN member states regarding the military presence of the United States near the coast of Venezuela. In the letter, Russian deputies urged Washington to stop its aggressive and provocative actions under the pretext of fighting drug trafficking. The State Duma points out that the military escalation contradicts the principles and norms of international law of the UN Charter, increasing tensions in the Latin American and Caribbean region. We now have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. The final break, don't go away. Welcome back. On Sunday, the United States Senate achieved the majority vote necessary to advance a bill that would end the federal government shutdown. The Senate reached the 60 votes needed to take the first step towards ending the shutdown. In this scenario, 8 Democrat senators agreed to support a package that would fund multiple agencies and programs for the entire fiscal year until January 30th, 2026. However, some senators assert that the decision will destroy the healthcare system and make it much more expensive for the majority of citizens. In this regard, Democrat Senator Bernie Sanders claims that pleasing the country's top 1% of millionaires will cost nearly 50,000 U.S. citizens' lives per year.
This was a very, very bad vote. What it does, first of all, is it raises healthcare premiums for over 20 million Americans by doubling, and in some cases tripling or quadrupling. People can't afford that when we are already paying the highest prices in the world for healthcare. Number two, it paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off of Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Studies show that will mean that some 50,000 Americans will die every year unnecessarily. And all of that was done to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%. As everybody knows, just on Tuesday, we had an election all over this country. And what the election showed is that the American people want us to stand up to Trumpism, to his war against working class people, to his authoritarianism. That is what the American people wanted, but tonight, that is not what happened.
And on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump granted a broad pardon to nearly 80 people, including political allies and advisors who participated in attempts to reverse the results of the 2020 elections in which he was defeated by Joe Biden. The U.S. President stated that he is granting a full and unconditional pardon to those who, according to his version, sought to point out alleged vulnerabilities in that year's electoral process. The order states that the decision seeks to end a period of polarization and prevent future administrations from bringing criminal proceedings against those who benefited. Among those benefiting are high-profile names such as the former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, the former White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows, advisor Boris Epshteyn, lawyers John Eastman and Kenneth Chesebro, and several former Republican Party leaders in key states such as Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. China announced the suspension of tariffs imposed on U.S. vessels for a one-year period. The Chinese Transportation Ministry said in a statement that the measure coincides with a similar suspension imposed by Washington. The move follows several rounds of trade and economic consultations between the two powers and the recent summit between Presidents Xi Jinping and Donald Trump in South Korea. This led to a reduction in tariffs on Chinese products from 57% to 47% and the authorization to purchase U.S. agricultural products. In the far northwest of China lies the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, located in Central Asia and home to the Uyghur people. Today, it combines its rich cultural heritage with urban development that seeks to preserve its ancient identity. Our correspondent Bruno Falsi brings us more details.
With over 2,000 years of history, Kashgar was the gateway to China for the ancient Silk Road. The city remains a vital center of Uyghur culture, where its musical, architectural, and craft traditions are kept alive.
这乐器呢是我们维吾尔族民族乐器。
These instruments are traditional to our Uyghur people. This one is called a tambur. It's the longest of our instruments and hold an important place in our culture, being the main instrument during the traditional ceremonies, especially in mukam performances. This other one is a rabab, another key instrument of the Uyghur people and one of the most important in our musical traditions. This is the dutar, equally essential and never absent from our music. My profession is also related to a tambur. I started learning it as a child with my father. Now I work at the local culture company. In our community, everyone learns at least one of these instruments from a young age. We have always passed on the music and cultural tradition for these instruments, and now our children are learning them too.
From childhood, every Uyghur family teach their children at least one of these instruments, passing on music and traditions that strengthen the community's cultural identity. The Chinese government has allocated $39 billion to heritage restoration, infrastructure, and tourism projects in Xinjiang, strengthening the local economy and preserving Uyghur culture.
这里我觉得目前
Kashgar is my favorite place in all of China. It blends modern development with a unique local culture. The markets, the music, and the historic architecture feels like I'm experiencing a city that has preserved its identity throughout the centuries. It's an unforgettable experience for me.
From Kashgar, a historical city where music, traditions, and development intertwine, Uyghur culture continues to be a bridge between past and present, preserving its richness and sharing it with the world. Bruno Falsi, Kashgar, Xinjiang, for teleSUR.
On Monday, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was released from prison after a judge ruled he could serve the rest of his sentence at home. The former president had been sentenced to prison on October 21st after a Paris court gave him a 5-year sentence for criminal conspiracy over a scheme to obtain election campaign funds for his 2007 presidential race. Sarkozy denies any wrongdoing and has appealed against that verdict, with a fresh trial on appeal scheduled for next spring. For the time being, he will serve his sentence at home with strict judicial controls. He is forbidden from talking to any officials from the Justice Ministry, including the Justice Minister Gerald Darmanin, and he is banned from leaving France. On Sunday, leaders of Islamic Jihad and Hamas raised their voices to denounce Israel's continued violation of the ceasefire and actions that are exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The Deputy Secretary General of Islamic Jihad, Muhammad al-Hindi, warned that the plan promoted by the United States to deploy an international force in the Gaza Strip would contain ambiguities that favor Israeli interests. For his part, Hamas spokesman Ismail Radwan said that Israel continues to violate the ceasefire deal. Hamas indicated that more than 240 people have been killed during these incidents and denounced that the amount of humanitarian aid entering the Gaza Strip is less than agreed. Gaza authorities point out that since October 2023, Israeli attacks have caused severe damage to homes, hospitals, and essential infrastructure. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.